And now, an Envision Financial podcast with Luke Smith on Canberra's 2CC.
Well, now I'm very pleased to be joined in the studio once more by Luke Smith from Envision Financial. And Luke, you're saying it's like I seem to be here every Friday, or certainly every other Friday.
At the moment you are, for sure.
I know, filling in the hot seat. And when we were together last time, we were talking all about negative gearing, and that was a really interesting conversation as well. So
yeah, look, it's been really interesting to see the feedback and the comments, especially through YouTube and the video on that platform, and the interest and the volume of interaction that proves that it is very topical and people are quite concerned about the direction of where that will head. So
yeah, and it's a conversation that's continued to be had, that's for sure. It was really interesting after we did talk about it. All of a sudden you saw the emergence of the other side of the debate. Everyone's saying, no, you know, like it's a bad thing, it's only rich people, and so they've definitely got on the bandwagon of that. But you're quite right, like I had the same thing, a lot of feedback about it, people saying it was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, it was interesting because, you know, the following week in the office I had a number of people, and it's really as soon as I walked out of here and turned my phone back on, the number of clients I have that were listening and said, very relevant, and the number that raised something that we didn't touch on in a great amount of depth is there are a number of people that are negatively geared with properties that I wouldn't put in the extremely wealthy bucket.
Absolutely.
So I think that leap to let's tax the rich, let's penalise the rich, I think it shows a real ignorance in relation to the demand and the desire to try and financially improve every demographic's financial position. And I think it would have a far more dire impact, as we touched on, for the people that wouldn't fall in the uber wealthy bracket, who still do it, but again, for which party are we trying to improve or punish?
That's right. And one of the comments that came back to me that did get me a little bit head up about that was, and they actually used the words of, well, if you're lucky enough or privileged enough to own a property that you can rent, then, you know, you sort of deserve to be taxed on it. It's like, well, hang on a minute. I don't think luck or privilege has a lot to do with it. Okay, maybe in some circumstances, but for the average investor out there, it's not luck. It's bloody hard work that they've had to do to get to that position, and we should be rewarding and encouraging that, not penalising.
So, and I think that word lucky just infuriates me beyond belief, because people always look at something from a lens that suits their argument. And I had a client say, and I've heard this online many a time, people love what you have, they don't love what you've done to get it. And that, for me, crushes that comment of luck, because you have taken the risk, you have taken the time, you have done the education, you have informed yourself, you have made the decision on top of whatever else you've got going on. Now, there's no luck in any of that, because you could also sit on the couch and do nothing.
Yes.
So, you know, I think that comment infuriates me at the best of times. And there's a great example of where a sheer lack or a separation of understanding is clear as day to come out and say something so naive. People don't end up being wealthy working 9 to 5. People don't end up being wealthy having a balanced lifestyle. And if that's what you want, great. No one said you don't have to have it. But don't complain what you don't have because of work you didn't do.
And don't expect to penalise people because they do those things or make
Completely.
those decisions or forego those, you know, that balanced lifestyle, whatever. If they've made those choices, then again, we should be rewarding that, not making things more difficult.
And I think, again, we come back to this, you know, tall poppy syndrome of, you know, how dare you be successful? Because we need to try and standardise things, because those that don't end up either not having the same or complaining about not having the same. And again, we come back to, you haven't done the work. You haven't taken the risk. You haven't made the choices, because nothing's free. I say often in a portfolio meeting, why have you got it? And what is it doing for you? And if you choose to not actually change your behaviour financially, then you're not going to change an outcome. Just like complaining that you don't go to the gym, but why am I fat? You can't get upset if someone calls you fat. If you're fat, you're just fat. Then you've got a choice to do something about it. You can sit on the couch and eat burgers, or you can go to the gym, have a walk, and do anything. And financially, I think it's the same. You can choose to inform yourself, you can choose to take on a risk. And I think creating the disincentives that we touched on last week is a wonderful illustration of the disconnection between mainstream society or mainstream consumer and the world that these pollies live in, which I'm not sure what planet it's on, but it's not here.
Well, that does lead to another thing, and I guess that'll come potentially to what I should be talking with you about today, but this is such an interesting conversation, is that, again, and it is politicians and our governments who have set us up to want us to look after ourselves as we age and go into retirement. So that's, all about self-managed super funds. It's making sure that, that if you do have investment properties that you can look after yourself. But now we're looking at changes to the aged care system, for example. So if you're better off, it's going to cost you more in order to be well looked after into your old age. So, of course, the comments that come back to me from people is, well, why would I bother? Why don't I just go on pension then and, live hand to mouth, because I'll be looked after better than what I will be if I attempt to not be a burden on the system.
Yeah.
And these are the questions that I guess they have an absolute right to ask.
Oh, look, completely. And I think I see it regularly in the office, in that if you come in under the age pension threshold, for example, you're entitled to about $43,000 of full age pension, where you have combined assets of less than, let's say, it's about $450, right? Or you can really work hard and strive to be self-funded, be over that maximum asset threshold of $1,030,000, and you're actually worse off. Because if you think about it, if I've got $400,000 in my super, I could draw 5% out of that and protect the capital. So there's 20 grand. And I get 43,000 of combined age pension plus all the benefits. So there's mid-60s. If I've got $1 million in my super fund and I get no age pension and draw 5%, I've got 50 grand.
Yeah, that's a.
So if you're going to be under, be way under. If you're going to be over, blow way over, but don't be on the fringe, because you're actually penalised.
Yeah.
They're the numbers, and they're the numbers I see all the time. Can I get some? When could I get it? Am I coming down or am I going up? And I think if they want to turn around and say, we're going to charge you to go into an aged care facility, okay, you've got more assets, so you pay more, okay, if that's the stance you want to take, but don't limit our ability as consumers at any stage of your working life to the amount of money that you can put in to be able to then fund yourself in that capacity. So at the moment you can do 120,000 non-concessional and 30,000 deductible. Okay, now I started in my industry in 2000. Do you know how much you could put in as a deductible contribution in 2000?
I can't recall, no.
It was $100,000 per person.
Right, yes.
Now, think about that.
That rings a bell.
$100,000 of deductible contributions in 2000. Now, think of an average wage. If you were earning 60 to 100,000 in 2000, you were crushing it. Because a good wage mid-90s, the top marginal tax rate was 65,000. Top marginal tax rate is now 180,000. So if you can put $100,000 in and claim a tax deduction then, and you're funding yourself, how now are we putting in 30,000 with wages of doubled or tripled, and yet they say we want to tax you more for going into an aged care facility when you don't have the means under the legislation to fund yourself should you have the capacity to do so. So if they want to charge people at that end, great, okay, you've got to sting us somehow. But if you are going to sting us, give us the tools we need to be able to cover the costs and prepare for it over time. Because far too often people come in and they might be 2 or 3 years from retirement. I had a guy walk in last week with 9 houses.
Good luck. No, not good luck to him. It's like, well done.
Well done. But then you say, well, what does that do for me in retirement? He can't go and sell 8 of those in the next 12 months or he'll pay massive tax.
Yep.
He's going to have to divest himself of those, because you can't assume that you hear 9 houses and go, oh, lots of rent, but there'll also be lots of debt on it.
Yeah, and other costs that are a
Correct.
part of that as well.
So you need to be planning with a system that is rewarding people to be able to fund themselves and actively save using whatever means are available to them. And I think if we're going to continue to have this collective view of, well, that's not fair for me and that's not fair for you, we're going to limit people's capacity to do things. If you can't do something, that is not to the detriment of someone that can, because people's situations are different. If we had $100,000 limit for deductible contributions and you earn $60,000 doing something, you don't have the means to reach that limit. If somebody's running, someone's an eye surgeon, I'll just create an example. Someone's an eye surgeon making $2 million, then they have the capacity to use that legislation. We can't set the legislation to be fair and reasonable, because the world isn't fair and reasonable and everybody has a different timeline and a different capacity. You might not be able to use that threshold while you are employed, but closer to retirement, you might want to use it to reduce capital gains, to minimise your tax, to do a range of other things. I think we need to have a more fair and reasonable approach to how people are going to fund these costs that are getting increased, because that aged care world it's a minefield of complexity. It's a minefield of emotion.
It is.
And you're dealing with families at a very, very heightened emotional time in their lives when they want simplicity and clarity. And I think that world is far from clear and concise, and it is frightening for some people. And I saw it this week. A lady said to me at 87, who was absolutely beautiful. She didn't want to leave a garden, she didn't want to leave a dog, and she had plenty of banter about her at 87, which was just wonderful to see. But she was going to use any resource she had to not lose that connection to her home for fear of the costs of moving.
Yes.
And the unknown of that world.
Yes. Look, let's take a break because it is 14 minutes to 5. And then when we come back, we might touch a little bit, you've mentioned it a couple of times there, we might talk a little bit about capital gains tax too.
Sure.
See how that goes. So it's 24.2 degrees and 14 minutes to 5. So I'm here with Luke Smith from Envision Financial, and we've been having another very interesting conversation continuing on from when I was here 2 weeks ago with Luke about negative gearing. And you raised a number of really valid points there, Luke, and one of them is the need for serious legislative change and tax reform instead of this tinkering around the edges and trying to keep so many disparate groups happy, and then no one is.
Yeah.
And it comes back to capital gains is another tax that people are talking about more at the moment. And I guess you have lots of conversations around that too.
Yeah, look, I think there are a number of things that if we actually, these people at Parliament House want to actually make a difference, and spoke to someone in my industry, because they seem to come up with what they think is important, or this is a massive change. Really? Yeah, I mean, it's capital gains is an issue, contributions is an issue, funding yourself. I think a lot of people go, well, I'll do everything I can to put money into super, which is great behaviour. But they don't understand the way that you can put the money in.
No, that's right. And that is, it's so complex.
Yeah, and the thresholds are different. There are different contributions types. And it breaks my heart sometimes, because I have people that might be working part-time, paying less than collectively 10% in tax because of what they're earning. And they'll come in and say, oh, but I've put 27,500, I've put 30,000 into super, which is great behaviour. But they've penalised themselves because the contribution tax rate is more than their marginal tax rate because of the amount of money or their net tax position with what they're doing. So I think information is key, and I think we need to look at saying, how can we actually get people to fund themselves? And there was a moratorium a number of years ago, it would have been 07, when the government said, okay, you can put $1 million into super one time.
Yes.
Remember
yes,
that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What they didn't say was you could put $900,000 in on the 1st of July when that finished, under the non-concessional rules. Yet everybody went out, sold houses, did this, and threw money into super.
Yes.
Because back then in 07, it was fund. Ageing population reduced the impact on Centrelink. Okay, great. So if they recognise that as a funding problem and a cost problem from an age pension perspective in 07, How are we where we are now with a $30,000 concessional contribution cap, which most people could blow through 3 times over?
Yes.
And again, you're penalised for working massive hours. You're penalised for taking risk and being self-employed. You're penalised for earning a significant amount of money just because you have the means to lower your total amount of tax. Now, anybody that comes in my office that's earning a significant amount of money is paying a significant amount of tax.
That's right. And it's not about paying the tax. You want to make sure that you're contributing your fair share. But it is about fair share.
Correct. Exactly right. And I think that's why, the government lifted the marginal tax rates a number of years ago as a disincentive for negative gearing.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to the top marginal rate at 65,000, now at 180, you would have had a lot more of the population at 65,000 than you did at 180. I don't quote me on the stat. Let's say it's 1% of the population earn more than 180,000. Well, if you're not at that limit, you're not getting 50 cents back on your negative gearing. So you'd argue, well, is it really that effective? I pay $10 to get 3 back. I'm still 7 short.
Yeah.
And my house has got to go up by that $7 or whatever the amortised number is just to break even, because I'm not getting the full benefit at my marginal tax rate if I earn less than 180,000. So I don't think it's just one conversation in isolation. I think we need to be able to promote the self-funding environment so that people can do as much as they can to get as much in the portfolio of their choice, be it a house, be it a super fund, be it however you're going to do it, to then be able to pay these exorbitant costs for getting into somewhere. Because from what I can see, aged care is just the new childcare. Childcare in 2000, not enough places, huge cost, and there was a significant time lapse between availability and supply.
Yes.
And then prices and values normalised. I think we're seeing the other side of it now with aged care. If you could build 100 of these facilities in the next 6 months, you'd probably fill them, and you would have supply meet demand, and you would normalise that potentially. Again, I'm not there yet. I'm not looking forward to get there, and I'd stay in my house.
Yes.
We're all going to get there, but I think we're seeing that at the moment with exorbitant prices. Throw in housing prices, throw in land values, throw in your taxes, and all of a sudden it is a very frightening proposition that people come into my office absolutely petrified at trying to consider what to do in an already emotionally charged environment because somebody may not be well or have capacity, and then you've got to go down this minefield of costs, charges, and wildly expensive places. It doesn't bode well for the future.
Yes, and I think one of the things that continues to emerge, and what I've read and heard about it as well, is a simplification of our entire system. And we've been talking about exactly that you almost wonder whether they make it so confusing. So the benefit goes to the government and not necessarily to the person out there who's earning $1. But now, Luke, we're going to be out of time. So tell us, how can people find you? Where's your information? Where's your book? Tell us all.
Yeah, so office number 62604749. We've got envisionfinancial.com.au on the internet. We've got the strategy stacker, Luke Talks Money, on iTunes and Spotify. We've got the YouTube channel Envision Financial Canberra, where you can subscribe and watch all of the shows that we do and all of the back catalogue. We've got the strategy stacker on the TikToker, and these types of strategic considerations and the uses for these strategies are all in Smart Money Strategy, your ultimate guide to financial planning, in all good bookstores, as well as Amazon.
Well, I'm glad to know that I might feature on your TikTok channel there, Luke.
We'll get you on YouTube before you know it.
Good on you all. It's been great to spend some time with you again, and a really interesting discussion. And I'm sure we're going to get some great feedback about it as well.
I'll see you again soon.
Luke Smith from Envision Financial there. It's 3 minutes to 5 o'clock.